Welcome back to the deep dive. Fantastic to have you with us again. This is where we really cut through the noise, digging into sources to pull out those key bits of knowledge, helping you get informed fast. And today, wow, we're jumping into something really fresh, hot off the presses, you could say. We've got insights from the Western Producer, published just yesterday, July 3rd, 2025. So it's super timely, really relevant, and packed with stuff, especially for what's happening right now in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Our goal today, unpack the big takeaways from these pages. We want you to quickly grasp the latest shifts in agriculture and rural life out on the prairies. Get ready for maybe some surprising facts and hopefully a few aha moments. And joining me, as always, is our expert guide to help connect the dots.
Absolutely, yeah. There's quite a bit to get into from this issue.
Okay, let's dive in then. The first thing that really jumps out from yesterday's Western Producer is this story about, well, an unexpected invader, coquilla. Now, we usually think of coquilla as a southern prairie weed, right? Something that loves the heat and dry spots like southwestern Saskatchewan, southern Alberta. That's the usual picture.
That was the conventional wisdom, yeah. But what's striking here is this unofficial project tracking its spread. And it's showing coquilla isn't just present further north. It might actually be getting established in places we didn't expect. We're talking areas like North Battleford in Saskatchewan, even up near Edmonton in Alberta's Peace Country. Bran Tideman, she's a weed scientist with Ag Canada, set up this platform on iNaturalist.org for people to submit photos. And they've got nearly 800 observations logged already, mostly Sask and Alberta. This isn't just, a weed moving. It's a serious heads up about herbicide resistance. Coquilla is notorious, right?
Yeah.
Resistant to glyphosate, group 4, 2, and 14. So when it pops up in new areas, often spreading along railways or leases before tumbling into fields, well, it demands a whole new way of thinking, like a collaborative ecosystem approach.
That's a really crucial point. So is this basically a new front opening up in the herbicide resistance battle? How urgent is it for farmers in these newly affected northern areas to get a handle on this?
Oh, absolutely. It's a new front. And the urgency, it's high. Because trying to manage widespread resistance after it takes hold is way harder, way more expensive. For producers up north, it means looking at their weed plans now, maybe moving away from relying too heavily on certain chemistries, and really embracing integrated strategies to stay ahead of this weed. It's super adaptable.
Right. Adapting strategies is key. And that idea of adaptation, it ties into the land itself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a bit, but stay in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
The Western Producer also has this, pretty bold prediction about farmland values, maybe unsettling for some.
Indeed. Yeah, there's an analysis by grain marketing analyst Trent Clarenbach. His technical work suggests Saskatchewan farmland values might be looking at a major drop, potentially more than 50%. He's talking about the current inflation-adjusted price, around $2,647 an acre, potentially falling back to $12,270, which, remarkably, would take it back to the previous peak from way back in 1981. To get there, Clarenbach uses tools like logarithmic scales and the relative strength index. These methods help spot long-term trends, market momentum, kind of stripping out the short-term noise. And what they're showing now is a market that looks really overbought. It signals a big correction might be overdue. It's similar to how they flagged previous bubbles, apparently. Like after that 81 peak, remember, values fell all the way to $476.90 by 93. So this projection, it's rooted in looking at those historical market cycles. It suggests that maybe now isn't just a time for caution, but maybe a strategic moment to think about diversifying beyond just owning land, kind of like in past downturns where the folks who adapted best came out ahead.
Wow, a 50% drop potential. That's a serious warning. So for a farmer thinking about expanding right now, with land prices being, as he says, quite extended, what's the core advice from Clarenbach? And conversely, what about someone maybe thinking about selling?
Well, his analysis screams caution for buyers. He strongly implies that waiting for a significant correction might be the smarter financial move if you're looking to expand. And for those thinking of selling, his models would suggest that now, before any potential downturn hits, could be a pretty good time to cash in on these high values. It's definitely a strong signal for making some strategic calls.
Okay, so keeping those land value thoughts in mind, what does this mean for what's actually being planted out there? The June 27th Statistics Canada seeded acreage report that's covered prominently in the Western Producer too, it has some really interesting details. Shows how farmers in Alberta and Saskatchewan are reacting, right?
Yeah, this report, it's based on surveying 25,000 farms, so it's pretty solid data. And it definitely shows farmers making calculated shifts. You can see them responding to specific market signals, for example, canola acreage, down 2.5% nationally. Manitoba saw a big drop, 9.2%. But interestingly, soybean acres in Manitoba shot up 13%. So a clear strategic shift there within oilseeds. In Alberta, farmers planted quite a bit more durum, 11.6% more. That actually pushed the national number up, even though Saskatchewan durum stayed pretty steady. Lentils are up 4% nationally, and there's a noticeable shift happening from red lentils to large greens, probably chasing specific market demand. Oats saw a bump, 3.3% nationally, with Alberta and Manitoba seeing big increases. Peas are up 9.1% overall. And here, Alberta really stands out, a 20.5% jump in yellow peas. That's a really sharp contrast to Saskatchewan, where yellow pea acres actually dropped, though Sask did plant more green peas, up 23% on the smaller acreage there. And flax. That's interesting. It finally broke its downward trend, up 23% to almost 620,000 acres. So renewed interest there.
But mustard, acreage crashed, down more than 40% from last year. So, yeah, you put it all together, it paints a picture of a really dynamic landscape. Producers are constantly tweaking their strategies.
That is a lot of recalculating going on. What really jumps out at you in these shifts, specifically for Alberta and Saskatchewan? What do you think it says about farmers' thinking right now? Are they chasing specific demands or maybe trying to hedge their bets against risk?
I think what stands out is how responsive they are, both to market demand and, regional conditions. Alberta's big jump in durum and yellow peas, that suggests they're trying to capitalize on strong demand for protein crops. And maybe they had favorable conditions for it. Saskatchewan's mix with some peas up, some down, that shows really nuanced local decision-making too. And that flax rebound is really interesting. It kind of hints at new uses maybe, or renewed export potential after that long slide. These aren't random changes, they feel very deliberate, trying to maximize returns and manage risk in what's still a pretty uncertain global market.
Yeah, absolutely critical information in that StatCan report. And speaking of critical market shifts, the Western producer also flags a really significant development for durum. This seems particularly relevant for growers in Saskatchewan and Alberta.
That's right. A really key detail here is Mexico. They used to be a major durum exporter, right? But now they're forecast to become a net importer in 2025-26, looking to do in about 400,000 tons. Why? It's prolonged drought, record low water levels in their key growing states like Sonora and Sinaloa, and that's just cut their acreage way back. So Mexico flipping from a big exporter to needing imports, that really shifts the global supply-demand balance. And given that, our own crop prospects in Saskatchewan and Alberta look better after the recent rains, well, this could definitely open up some new solid opportunities for our durum producers. Could potentially firm up prices, open new export channels.
That's certainly good news for durum growers. And sticking with positive notes for certain crops, there's a big investment story coming out of Saskatchewan, a brand new flax processing facility.
Indeed. Grain millers, they're maybe better known for oats. They've just opened this new state-of-the-art flax plant in Delisle, Saskatchewan. It's a big investment, they're saying, north of $30 million. And their commitment to flax is interesting because, as we noted, flax acres have really shrunk, right? From maybe 1.5, 1.8 million acres in the 2000s down to 600,000 or even less recently. But the demand apparently has stayed pretty strong underneath it all. So this new facility, it's located right near Saskatoon, where flax still has a decent foothold, and it's aiming to meet that demand, maybe even look at offshore markets. Plus, there's another angle. It helps with Canada's fertilizer security, too. There'll be a local manufacturer for sulfur products like Arctic Acid and Triple Kick. Those are important inputs here.
That sounds like great news for the flax sector, maybe signaling a bit of a comeback. And for those producers in Saskatchewan who are still dealing with dry conditions, there's an important announcement from the province, something that might offer a bit of relief.
Right. For farmers really grappling with drought, the Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation, SCIC, has brought back what they call a double low yield appraisal process. Basically, it lets some struggling crops be put to use as feed. How it works is, if your yield falls below a certain threshold, SCIC can appraise it down to 0 for your claim. That lets the farmer salvage the crop for livestock feed without it hurting their future insurance coverage. The key is, all the acres of that crop have to be diverted to feed. They used this successfully back in 2021 and 2023. Other dry years. It kind of serves two purposes. Helps livestock guys find extra feed when pastures are poor, and encourages crop guys to work with them. And it's also a good reminder for everyone to make sure they're enrolled in agristability. That deadline is July 31st. It's another key risk management tool.
That sounds like a really practical approach, helping producers manage through tough spots. Okay, let's pivot now over to the livestock side of things. The Western producer points out some continuing challenges in the hog sector, especially around price insurance.
It's true. The numbers are pretty stark, actually. Livestock price insurance is available, but the uptake, incredibly low across Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. In Saskatchewan, get this, they've never sold a single policy, not one. The main sticking point seems to be the premium cost, because unlike crop insurance, these premiums aren't subsidized by government. And to kind of put a human face on this, the paper tells the story of Dr. Frank Marshall. He's one of Alberta's last independent pork vets, based near Camrose. He's been around a while, and he's seen the number of commercial hog farms in Alberta just plummet, from thousands down to maybe 260 now. So his expertise, whether he's at a big place like the 700 sow Heartland Colony barn near Bashaw or smaller operations, it becomes even more critical in an industry that's shrinking and dealing with, disease risks and those crazy market cycles. Managing the flow through the barn is just vital.
Yeah, it's tough to imagine the pressure with that kind of industry contraction. Beyond just the premium costs, though, are there other things holding producers back from using this price insurance? Is it too complex, maybe? Or maybe, I don't know, a trust issue with programs after past experiences?
That's a really good question. Premiums are definitely a big part of it. But yeah, you could also point to the perceived complexity of the programs. Maybe there's a bit of a wait-and-see attitude too, hoping prices will bounce back without needing insurance. Some producers might just have a reluctance towards programs that aren't fully subsidized, or maybe they feel the coverage offered doesn't quite match their specific risks. It's likely a mix of factors, making it a tough challenge for the industry to solve.
Okay. Another big change coming down the pipe, this one impacting the cattle industry, especially out here in the West. Those long-awaited federal traceability regulations.
Right, what's significant here is we're on a countdown now. These updated rules from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA, they're expected in early 2026, and they're going to really tighten things up. The window for reporting cattle movements is shrinking from 30 days down to just 7. Plus, there are new requirements coming for premises ID. This is all seen as a really essential tool for emergency management. Think about disease outbreaks, especially with more global trade and travel risks. It directly impacts our big cattle sectors in Alberta and Manitoba. The CCIA, the Canadian Cattle Identification Agency, they've already been upgrading their digital systems to get ready. But the real challenge, or question, is how places like auction markets and assembly yards, especially maybe in Manitoba, are going to streamline this. How do they handle the reporting without getting bogged down recording every single tag individually? They're exploring options, like group moves, to make it work without grinding trade to a halt.
All right, streamlining will be key. And tied into traceability, there are actually some positive changes happening with the BSE surveillance program. That's so important for keeping our cattle markets open.
Indeed. Our BSE negligible risk status, which is absolutely vital for trade, depends on continued testing. And the big change now is that the CFIA is administering the program nationally. What that means on the ground is that vets are now paid mileage and a consulting fee for collecting samples. This sounds small, but it's a potential game changer for getting better participation, especially in provinces like Saskatchewan and BC, where honestly it was inconsistent before because vets weren't directly paid for their time and travel. So the bigger picture here, it's a win-win. It helps us keep that critical trade status, and it's also a great chance for, say, younger vets to sharpen their diagnostic skills and offer more complete health programs to their clients. It benefits the whole herd health system.
Okay, let's move beyond the farm gate for a moment. There's a really fantastic story in here from rural Alberta. It's about community resilience and the unsung heroes keeping people safe.
Yeah, this was pretty remarkable. It highlights the municipal district of Tabor Regional Fire Services in Alberta, its entire service, staffed by 85 volunteers. They cover a huge area, about 4,200 square kilometers, protecting around 7,500 people across several farming communities like Barnwell, Grassy Lake, Enchant. I mean, think about the cost. If these were all paid positions, it would be hundreds of millions for the municipalities. These volunteers provide that service. And what's really unique is the collaboration between the volunteers and the farming community itself. You often have farmers right there on the front lines using their own tractors, their own discs to cut fire breaks. That's becoming even more important with bigger farm equipment, maybe changing the landscape, fewer natural breaks. That teamwork just makes rural fire protection incredibly effective. It really speaks volumes about the strength of those communities.
That is genuinely inspiring, just people stepping up. On a different note, another rural challenge, Saskatchewan farmers are still battling a very familiar foe.
Yes, the gophers. Richardson's ground squirrels, technically. Farmers in Sask are definitely still wrestling with them. The Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation and SARM, the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, have actually teamed up. They're launching a program to help landowners with safe and ethical gopher control. And what's striking is the immediate huge demand they saw for this help. It just underscores how much crop loss and land damage these critters cause, especially now that strychnine isn't available anymore. Landowners are reporting losing, several acres of canola or wheat just to gophers. So it really shows how local groups are having to innovate, trying to find new ways to help farmers deal with these persistent pest problems without the old tools.
Okay, finally, let's touch on two things highlighted in the producer: the Buy Canadian trend and some unique rural experiences.
Right. There seems to be this growing wave of Canadian patriotism, maybe partly spurred by things like recent U.S. tariffs, and it's clearly boosting consumer demand for Canadian-made stuff. Goodleaf Farms is a great example. They're a vertical farm company, facilities in Quebec, Ontario, significantly one in Calgary, Alberta. They've seen demand for their baby greens and microgreens basically double overnight. And if you put that in context, they're really focused on sustainability, nutrient density, longer shelf life, plus they have this ambitious goal to be the world's first profitable vertical farm. Apparently, their Gulf facility hit profitability, and they expect Calgary to follow suit. It all suggests a really powerful consumer trend is underway. So this Buy Canadian feeling, it raises the question for producers, especially in provinces like Alberta, how can they tap into this? How might it shape production and market opportunities going forward?
That's definitely something for producers to watch. Exciting potential there. And speaking of unique Alberta and Saskatchewan experiences, there's this fascinating piece about a ranch that really blends history with cowboy heritage.
Yeah, what's really noteworthy here is the Resort Ranch. It's down in Saskatchewan, Cypress Hills, and it just became the province's first provincial heritage property. It's more than just a working ranch, though it is that too. It tells this long story of a family operation, started way back in 1904. And they're still offering guests these really immersive experiences, horseback riding, ATV tours, showing off the beauty and the history of the prairies. Jason Reeser, he's fifth generation, still cooks his famous barbecue steak with their own locally raised beef. It's a fantastic example of how you can take deep agricultural roots and evolve them into a successful tourism venture. They draw guests from all over Canada, especially, neighboring Alberta and Saskatchewan, but also internationally. Even though, funnily enough, the main road to get there actually comes through Alberta. It's just a great testament to preserving heritage while creating new economic life.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a lot of ground today. Everything from kokia showing up unexpectedly far north in Alberta and Saskatchewan to those stark economic predictions for Saskatchewan farmland,
Yeah.
the big shifts in crops like durum, and just the incredible resilience we're seeing in prairie communities and industries. It's so clear that Western Canadian agriculture and rural life are just constantly adapting, innovating, tackling whatever comes their way.
It really is. And all this brings us to maybe a final thought, an important question for you, our listener, to chew on. Given these rapid market changes we've talked about, the innovations happening right on the ground in Alberta and Saskatchewan, the whole evolving global picture, what do you think is the single most critical factor for a farm's long-term success over the next decade? Setting aside the obvious challenge of weather, is it pure adaptability? Is it about adopting new technology? Or maybe something else entirely?
That is a fantastic question to leave everyone with, something definitely worth thinking about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope you feel more informed, maybe even a little inspired by the stories we pulled from yesterday's Western producer. Until next time, keep digging deeper.